listen-only mode.
Welcome to the ASID Interior Design Billings Index First Quarter Report webinar. We thank all of the attendees for joining us today for this conversation and for the report. Questions at the end. If you have any questions at the end, you may do so by typing in the questions, and we will curate those questions to be included in our discussion. The presentation and recording will also be sent out to the full media tomorrow. For this first quarter, we're delighted to introduce a few new panelists for the presentation. My name is Susan Chung. I am the Senior Research Associate here at ASID. I cover the research projects for both the internal and external research pieces, including the business performance for interior design. Also with us is...
I'm Susan Wiggins. I'm the Senior Strategic Advisor for ASID. Was previously on the call with Jack about a year ago, so happy to be back here with Jack. I've been with ASID for about 15 months now in this role as Senior Strategic Advisor, better known as COO, second in command, Randy's right hand, all of those good things, and come to ASID with a background in the interior design industry through Interior Designers of Canada and a long history in the association world. So happy to be here and happy to introduce Jack Kleinhans. Take it away, Jack.
Thanks, Susan Wiggins and Susan Chung. Just by way of background, I've been with the American Society of Interior Designers for several years. Back in November of 2010, we launched our Business Performance Index, and this ASID survey is conducted monthly. We hope to provide some unique perspective on current business conditions as well as future business conditions for the interior design industry. We look at things nationally, and we also have some opportunity to look at different regions and sizes of firms. Our panelists are varied in their background in terms of design, architecture, engineering, depending upon the firm that responds to our survey. We also ask, and we'll talk about it shortly, a question about the outlook and how they see general business conditions. Just to also provide some background to the survey results that we'll be reviewing today. The index that we use is an index centered on 50, and above 50 indicates expansion and below 50 is a contraction. So keep that in mind as we perhaps go through these charts. And let's begin. Our first chart, which you should be seeing on your monitor, shows the billing index and the inquiry index, looking at the period from March 2016 to March 2017. Now the dashed lines are the actual observations. What we've done here is we have tried to smooth out the ups and downs, sort of the seesaw that occurs from month to month, because there is some seasonality here. And as you can see, the survey results for the first quarter showed actually improvement from our December scores. The dashed lines are above. March ASID billing index was 62.8, clearly an advantage over December's value of 52.9. The billing index is actually above the 3-month average and suggests momentum and certainly some positive revenue gains. Just by way of comparison, not shown on this chart is that the 62.8 index is the third highest index that we've seen in the 6 years of this survey. The highest index was recorded in May of 2014, which was 65.9, and the second index was a little bit over a year ago for February of 2016 at 63.4. Now, also on this chart, we see that the new project index rose to 58. That would be the red dash line, or called IDBI inquiries, and it increased from 58. It rose to 58, up from the 53.3 in December. Very close to one of the higher scores that we've seen, and that was the score 59.2 in September. So overall, you know, billings and business conditions seem to have been very good for the first quarter, and that's kind of somewhat interesting, largely because the first quarter GDP numbers were very weak for the United States. We had only 0.7% growth on a quarterly basis. So in spite of overall perhaps softness in the economy, the industry seems to be doing okay, and probably better than okay. So on our next slide, we show how the index has performed relative to the size of firm. And when we look at across all size of firms, the sole practitioner, the firms with 2 to 9, 10 to 24, and 25 or more, they're all showing indexes above that 50, the magic 50 number. The sole practitioner design firms reported a score of 60.9. The purple, excuse me, that's the blue, and that's been at a reasonable pace throughout the last year. We see that the 2 to 9 firms have actually outperformed in terms of billings, if you will, throughout that whole period. They reported a score of 63.8 in March compared to the 60.9 for the sole practitioner. Nonetheless, you know, we do see a volatility. Again, surveys like this are prone to have that volatility, but again, I think our interpretation is that there has been some pickup in the last few months, as we saw on the previous slide on the broader measurement. When we look at different regions, gives us another perspective, and we go to the next slide. And we do see the fall off that occurred as December rolled out and into January to a certain extent. Now there's some seasonality, we believe, in billings in many cases, as firms are finishing up their projects for the year, or dealing with the holidays. So there probably that spike could be related to, in some cases, just some seasonal variation. But also, we knew the economy kind of fell off its mark later in the year. It was kind of a softer quarter, actually not as soft as the first quarter, but nonetheless, the important thing is that the design firms across all regions are showing billing growth relative to some low January scores, ranging from 59 in the West to 66 in the Northeast. I think it's interesting to see that there has been some pickup, especially in the Northeast and the Midwest. It's been very volatile, but that's also a reflection of certainly regional economic activity and population changes. We've seen other data in the economy. If you look at perhaps housing and or even employment growth, the Midwest and the Northeast has been challenged more so than the areas of the South and Southeast, Southwest. We know that the population has been shifting that way for the last 2 decades. Now, one thing that's not shown on the chart is that we regularly compare our performance against the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, and their readings also posted readings above 50 in March after a dip earlier in the year. So we're following and fairly comparable to what they have been registering so far in the first quarter. Our next slide actually tries to put some perspective relative to how consumers are purchasing goods and services. There was about $321 billion worth of spending on furnishings and durable goods by consumers in the United States during the first quarter. And you can see that we don't have a perfect correlation, but the fact of the matter is that a lot of dollars have been going towards renovation, improvement, new structures. Certainly this industry is driven by needs for furnishings and furniture, whether it be new construction or existing structures. So the growth in spending for consumers in the first quarter actually wasn't all that bad. It was 3.3% on a year-over-year basis, and it's pretty comfortably the same as it was in the fourth quarter. I suspect that there's, again, some seasonal issues here, and as both our inquiries and our billing numbers are showing upward tendencies, we should probably see some improvement in the second and third quarter. And if you go all the way to the left, you can see back in 2011 we had sort of some similar pattern where the third and fourth quarters pick up, and probably we could see that again in 2014. 2015 was some steady growth, but still that first quarter tends to be a tough one, as we've seen. We'll go on to the next slide, which is our final slide, and it gives us some perspective on the outlook by our panelists. The ASID index, which is in blue. Now, the reason why these lines are different is largely because of the construction of the index. They don't use the same methodology as we do, but what we're looking at is the somewhat correlation up or down the direction, more of a barometer than a thermometer here. For the outlook for the next 6 months, the blue line is showing a 63.4. Not much change from December's number, but we are seeing consistency as they look forward on a sequential basis, and it argues for continued expansion for the design industry going out the next 6 months. Now, if we look at the Conference Board, they put together an expectations index. The Conference Board is more from a consumer standpoint. So as this industry reflects both sort of consumers, but also households, it also our industry is responding to overall institutional commercial activities. The Dodge Momentum Index is going to measure, is our hope to measure what's going on in the broader construction world. But let's stay on the Conference Board. It rose to 113.8 in March. That's a 3-month moving average, by the way, a very strong historical high. However, I have to report, because it just came out not too long ago, that the number in April has recoiled a bit, but it still remains elevated. So still, I think, a positive outlook for the next 6 months. And then finally, the Dodge Momentum Index increased 6.7% in March to 144. It was revised, but still it's 29% higher than it was a year ago. And I think that we can see that it's signaling potential increases in the industry. So in sort of a summary thought process here, I think the recent data indicate that the economy did cool off in the first quarter. Several factors certainly influenced the slow start. Weather was an important part, in good and bad. But we're looking at recent consumer sentiment, employment, retail sales reports are all currently reporting really positive signs that the weak momentum that we saw in the first quarter should probably be mostly transitory. My expectation is that the GDP, personal consumption expenditures, which was very weak in the first quarter, should be picking up in the second quarter considerably. from a 0.3% to possibly 3%. So the overall GDP number should actually be very strong. And then looking out even further, my belief is that the economy probably will perform as well this year. Overall, without any changes to public policy, we'll probably do pretty much the same as we did in 2016. And with that, I'll turn it over to Susan.
Thank you, Jack. That was a great overview of the first quarter of 2017. In addition to the questions that we send out monthly for the IDBI business performance survey, we also ask a couple of questions for our panelists, which are optional, but these questions are to better understand some of the context behind the business, what's going on, how our business is doing, what are their thoughts on it. So with these bonus questions, we try to understand a little bit more and also push the thinking behind the business for us to understand what's going on. For this first quarter, we replicated the questions that we asked last year in the first quarter as well to kind of get more of a historical understanding of what's going on. For January, the question we had asked was how many hours per week did our panelists work on average over the past year. We're seeing across last year, so 2016, and for the 2017 results that are somewhat similar. You'll notice on the graph that most of our panelists are working within the 40 to 50 hours per week. But if we move on to the next slide to get a little bit more detail behind this, we see that it really ranges. Our panelists are both part-time and full-time workers, so we have about 10 to 80 hours that the responses vary from. But among those who are working full-time that we have put as 40 hours per week or more, we average about 51 hours per week among those. But then where the most frequent hours that our respondents had reported on are 40 hours or 50 hours per week. So we're definitely seeing that we're doing that typical full-time work, but we're also exceeding it, much so, and a lot of that does come from the characteristics of our industry and the profession, and really getting into a lot of the work, a lot of time that's required to work on projects, and also to develop the business behind the interior design industry as well. From this, we're also seeing that designers with 31 to 40 years of experience tend to work the longest hours, averaging to about 52 hours in this case. And we're definitely seeing from this that most of the principals, partners, and owners of firms are doing an amazing job in both helping with the business and also leading projects. But with that, we are seeing that there is more time and effort being put into it. In the following month, we asked the question of, compared to the previous year, how much do you expect sales to grow? It's similar to what Jack had presented for the first quarter. We're definitely seeing that our panelists are very positive in growth, including those for sales. With most of the responses, the panelists expecting an increase of 25%, so 0 to or 1 to 25% increase in sales growth. So we're definitely seeing that there is that positive sentiment compared to 2016 or the year before. It has been a little bit moderated from that, so it is slightly lower, but as Jack had mentioned, if you look at the overall sentiment, it's definitely still in that positive area. Finally, in the most recent survey, we had asked how much impact the following factors have on our panelists' work on their design projects. We're definitely seeing a consistency across the 2 years that we've asked this question. national economy being having the highest impact on design projects, but also generational trends having an impact as well. For national economy, a lot of the comments that our panelists had included to describe their thought processes from this was due to the election, not knowing really where the change is heading towards. A lot of our designers have been very open about it, but just that uncertainty, not knowing what those changes will be and what the consequences from those changes would be, that they still see that economy is something that needs to be watched out for. For generational trends, as we're seeing the aging population and seeing more projects with aging in place, definitely seeing that to be as part of their projects and project inquiries. And then again, overall, very consistent in what we're seeing, the factors that are impacting the design projects. But we're definitely seeing that everything is very important to the design work. There's not any one thing that is not part of the whole industry and profession. And some of them, say for example, environmental concerns are slightly lower, including technology, but we're seeing that to be more stabilizing. So already not a trend, but already in the design work. So it is more of the norm and all of that. So we're always interested to really look into these bonus questions and see the overall picture, also look into more of the details. So we're looking forward to the next quarter and what the bonus questions and the responses we get from those to really see what's going out there in the business performance. So with that, this covers what we had prepared for the first quarter report, including the bonus questions. We'd like to open it up for questions among those who are attending. So if you do have any questions, please type in your question. If not, or if you come up with any questions after this recording or as you're listening to this recording, please feel free to reach out to us with your question, and we'd be happy to provide you with our thoughts and insights to answer them.
Jack, did you have any additional commentary on anything that was covered either in your section of the webinar or in the graphs that Susan just covered?
Well, as Jack is thinking, one interesting point that I wanted to make was, as we're seeing positive growth and seeing an increase in business and business inquiries, that also means that there's more business. More business means that then there's more work. More work means more time. More time, we are still limited in the number of time that we each have in a day to work. So that does lead into possibility of more jobs. We are seeing, if you remember the previous slide with the impact factors, that labor shortage was one factor that increased over the past 2 years, that people are being more aware that there is a labor shortage, but that also gets into then really the amount of business that we have in this industry, but it gets into hiring talent, which we've also included it as one of our bonus questions for the next quarter. So we look forward to seeing how our panelists respond to that question in seeing hiring.
Well, to kind of add on to that, I mean, the fact of the matter is the shortage of workers, the shortage of talent, is seen across the board in many industries. There's over 5 million openings in the United States based on the most recent release of the BLS JOLTS data. I know hirings are moving forward, but we still have a very high level of openings, and not only as Susan has mentioned that finding qualified workers is an issue. It's that way in many industries, and to that extent, as there's fewer and fewer people to be hired, qualified workers in particular, then we're going to find companies increasingly bidding against each other to attract workers, and wages should then begin to accelerate. And I think that's one of the challenges we have in this environment, because everybody's so cost conscious, and whether you're building or refurbishing or renovating or making purchases for your home relative to a new design, people are very cost conscious, and I think that any wage acceleration could actually contribute to the problem even more so, that people are unable to attract some of these qualified people. But the important thing is to try to attract them, and this is going to be an ongoing problem. It's not going to go away, especially since we're into almost our 8th year of the economic expansion. The number of people out there who are unemployed will get smaller, but at the same time, we should also see people feeling pretty comfortable from moving from one firm to another, because they feel like the economy is doing well enough that they can risk changing jobs. So it's the dynamic that we're going to be facing, I think, in this industry, and in fact for many and most industries in the nation. I think there's still a lot of uncertainties out there in the United States, in our country. If you look at consumer confidence and business sentiment indices, they still remain fairly elevated, and we call that sort of the so-called soft data, indicating that things are fairly positive. Yet, as we've seen in the first quarter, was very disappointing in terms of the so-called hard data. Spending was off by consumers and by businesses. I sense that we'll see some convergence over the next few months, maybe the next couple of quarters, where we see some pickup in spending, and maybe the high elevated business and consumer confidence indices come down a little bit. But I think it's important that we recognize that if we start to get some real traction in the broader economy, that that psychologically can be very good for business and for households. And we're not going to have breakout speed in 2017, but enough fuel in there to really kind of push us forward into the end of the year. And still uncertainty about what public policies might have to impact decision making, whether it be a household or a business, or broadly speaking, public policy. So challenging times, but good times, perhaps.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. That's a good wrap up and summary. And I think I'd just like to add, just by way of closing out, is that, as Susan reported, one of the most important factors for the members themselves, for the people who are participants in this survey, is that the economy is an important driver for them in terms of planning their business, helping their business uncover what's next for them. So the importance of the IDBI program from ASID, we understand the importance of this service to our members and to those who aren't members. and hope that you find the information valuable and useful in helping you plan your next quarter for your business. So thank you to Jack and to Susan for their participation today, and look forward to next quarter's index.
Thank you.